Hello, everyone. Good evening. Hello, and welcome to IBSI's weekly forum on Africa, Israel, and Black America. I'm your host, Joshua Washington, the executive director of the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel. And we have some things to get into today. First off, that theme song you heard was called "The First 7 Miles" by Randy Sandoli. If you've never heard of him before, go look him up. He's streaming on all streaming platforms. There's an entire album called Simca, and you can hear the rest of his songs there. So be sure to check him out, Randy Sandoli. The next thing is visit our website at ibsi.org. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome. You'll get to learn a little bit about IBSI in this forum. Also, you can read our articles and listen to our podcast episodes on Substack. If you go to ibsi.substack.com, check out our newsletter called Africa Israel Weekly. You'll be able to see the things that we talk about, the things that we write about. We write very constantly on there. We have a lot of content on that page. Also, if you do know who we are already and you want to support us, then consider becoming a legacy builder. A legacy builder, if you want to know more about what a legacy builder is, go to ibsi.org/donate, and you'll be able to see that you can give a monthly small amount, as small as you want to make it and as big as you'd like to make it. Some people have started off very small and have grown now over time. You know, I was encouraged to give at least $18 a month and then grow that as you are able to. But that is how you can give to IBSI. We would very much appreciate that as we continue this very, very important work. And then lastly, but not least, every third Thursday of the month, our CEO and founder hosts what's called IBSI Pastors Presents. Go to ibsi.org/dates, and you'll be able to see not just that monthly event that we have, not just that recurring event, but the other events that we have coming up as well. We have a lot of in-person events that we're planning at the moment that will be up on our website very soon. Very excited. Going all the way to the end of this year, actually. We already have dates that we're working out that go all the way out to Hanukkah this year. And then all the way back to close to from this date now. So check out our website, go to our dates page, look at the events that we have coming up. We'd love to see you in person, and we'd love to do an event with you. If we can come to your area. All right. So now, ladies and gentlemen, we have a few things to talk about today. One of which I didn't put on the agenda, but I remembered, and I got an email that reminded me just from another publication that I follow. I said, yes, I need to address that, and it'll kind of actually be folded into what we need to talk about here today. And that's just the craziness of the ICC, the International Criminal Court. But we'll talk about that in a minute. So first things first, let's just get this out here already, because this was probably the most recent thing that happened. The president of Iran, President Ibrahim Raisi, is dead. And, you know, I think that if there's anything that a death of what Iranians have nicknamed him, the butcher of Iran, if there's anything that a death of this type of person shows you, it's the hearts and minds of people, right? There are people who are celebrating, and rightly so, and there are people who are mourning, which is very odd, right? But this man, not only was he had an infamous reputation. Obviously, he worked with the Ayatollah Khamenei, all those things. He himself is responsible for the mass slaughtering of Christians in Iran. He is responsible for the stifling of women's rights in Iran. Like, this man has definitely been the icon of human rights abuse in Iran and all over the world, as Iran is one of the biggest, I should say, state sponsor for global terror. So yes, we pull no punches about that. That's a good thing that he's dead and he's gone. praying for the people of Iran, praying that this transition of power, whatever happens, that it's an outcome that turns out better for the people of Iran and not worse. But this is definitely what I've been seeing, at least on social media, from my Iranian friends around the world. This is still a happy day, and so that's great. I saw that leaders in the UN called for a moment of silence for the death of President Ibrahim Raisi, which is odd, right? Which is always curious. But I mean, obviously, this is the United Nations. It's the same United Nations that has people on its Human Rights Council and Women's Rights Council, like China and Afghanistan and Iran. So I mean, how much can you really expect from an organization that's pretty corrupt to the core, right? We've talked about that before. We talked about um, the former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan. He's not here anymore with us. I don't think at least from his public career, wouldn't consider him a Zionist, or at least an outward one. But he even took note of it to say, okay, but there's so many issues going on in the world that we aren't addressing at all. Like, we keep focusing on Israel, and he even made statements against Israel. He wasn't even saying he didn't believe the accusations against Israel. He was saying, okay, I get that, but why haven't we been talking about Sudan, which we're going to talk about today? Why haven't we been talking about the Congo? Why haven't we been talking about Nigeria? Like, it's just odd that the only country who's committing human rights abuses is this one tiny country over here, and no one else is. And to me, that made his point more powerful, because what he was saying was, he wasn't even necessarily saying we're being unfair to Israel. He was just saying, okay, great, but what about the other countries, right? This just seems weird that we're just so narrowly focused on one. So, yes. So, but hey, again, no one I see in their right minds is complaining about the death of President Raisi. So we are watching to see what unfolds from this. Iran also has become, over the past few years now, one of, if not the biggest sponsor of terrorism, specifically on the African continent. And that has a whole host of other layers to it, because a lot of the terrorist groups in Africa are sponsored by Iran. And if you think about that, and think about the fact that if you've been following us for any length of time, that the slavery the vast majority of the slavery that's on the African continent are done by Arabs, by Arab Muslims, African Muslims as well, but mainly Arab. Then you would it's not hard to see that connection, that Iran sponsors, at the very least, some of the slave trading that goes on in the African continent, probably way more than some, right? So this is a big deal for not just Iranians, but people around the world. So yeah, we're following this. We'll continue to follow it and keep everyone updated as we go, because this is a big deal, and it could swing very hard one way or the other. I mean, there's a lot of things that could happen from there. Okay. So now, the other thing about that is, I mean, just the fact that right now, and I mean, this goes without saying, but those war that Israel is fighting right now in Gaza to get back hostages, we've been sadly finding out, it's been confirmed a few times now, bodies have been found in Gaza that aren't alive, of hostages that have been killed and discarded of. And so it's been getting spirits down, but also there's still a lot of hope, because there's still a lot of other hostages. The past few weeks, there have been a couple of hostage rescues. And so, but all of this, again, Hamas is linked to Iran as well. So this is not just, with all the distractions and the Free Palestine marches and people raising their fists, part of what that is a distraction from what's really going on with this war. And this is a proxy war between the West and Iran. That's what this is. And as much as the U.S. right now wants to wants to distance itself from Israel, put yokes on Israel and tell Israel they can't do X, Y, Z, and we won't give you arms unless you da 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 da. This war still is very much directed at us. This is a war of the West versus tyranny. And we can side with tyranny if we want to. We can continue to lift sanctions off of Iran. We can continue to cozy up with them. We can continue to fund them to the billions while we give Israel funds as well. And then we've been funding both sides of the war. We can continue to do that. It's not going to keep us safe if this thing goes pear-shaped. It's coming for us as well. It's coming for the Christians. It's coming for the liberal democracies. It's coming for anything that is not strictly lined up with the agenda of Iran, of Hamas, of whoever takes power if they happen to win. It's just not. So so Israel's fighting a war. It's on the front lines of a war against terror, global terror. And the way that the leaders and the way that the general public, the way that we respond to this, the way that we have been responding to this is going to set a precedent for these next few years, because I'm telling you right now, this sets a bad precedent. And we're going to get into a little bit of that today. Excuse me. So, hello everyone, welcome. It's good to see you. I see people starting to log in here more and more. It's good to see you all. Good to see you all. Be sure to drop some questions or whatever in the comments, questions, whatever, and I'll try to answer them as we go along here. But speaking of, we're talking about a couple of things here. I want to show, there's a link here, and there's a video attached to this link, and I would like for our producer, if you see it there, if you could play that. It's a Twitter link that our CEO tweeted earlier today or yesterday about Nigeria. If you have it, producer, just go ahead and play that for us. If not, it's just a quick few second video clip that I wanted to share with you. If you have it, just let me know. So it's just a quick clip here. What you just saw was families in Nigeria, in this area called the Zamfara state. They're fleeing their homes after the Fulani herdsmen invaded that area and kidnapped over 500 people. And one thing that IBSI continues to say, our CEO echoed it again the other day when he tweeted about this, is that October 7th happens every day in Nigeria, every day in Sudan, every day in Mauritania, every day in Algeria, every day in Libya, every day in the Congo, in the DRC. October 7th happens every day in these places. People are slaughtered, murdered, kidnapped, forced to convert, little girls are forced to have babies for these Islamists, people who are capturing them, was Boko Haram, the Fulani herdsmen, whether it's the RSF in Sudan, whether it's Al-Shabaab in Kenya. This happens on a regular basis. And when we say this, and when our African partners also say this, they don't say it to minimize October 7th. It's actually the opposite. They're saying this to say, we feel your pain and we stand with you so strongly, right? I've referenced this article many times, and I'll come back to it again, but Simon Dang, you guys saw him in an event that we put on a few weeks ago. Former slave from South Sudan, was enslaved when he was 9 years old for a few years, and he tells his whole story about how he got freed. As a matter of fact, check out his article called "First They Came for My People, Then They Came for the Jews." And what he talked about, one of the things he talks about in the article is, he says, I can't tell you what it's like being a slave. I can explain to you the different aspects of it, right? Being treated as less than an animal, being forced to sleep outside um, with the rest of the farm animals, living in a house where no one loves you, being beaten, being constantly told what to do, where to go, and mistreated, and all those things. He said, but being subservient to someone else, being subjected as a slave to somebody else, he's like, I can't describe that for you. I cannot even describe that. Um, and so then he goes on, he tells his whole story of how he was able to escape. Um, I mean, just crazy story. I mean, literally, this could be a riveting like book the way he tells it. But then he talks about October 7th, and he says, yeah, the first thing that our friend Simon did when he heard about October 7th, he got on the next available flight. Tried multiple times because there weren't flights going out to Israel for a little bit. The next flight out to Israel, he was there and led a march from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, um, to march in solidarity. He led a whole group with him, and then he just was with his Israeli brothers and sisters, praying with them, speaking with them, sitting with them, because he was like, I know this pain. I know this pain. So that's what I mean by it happens all the time on the African continent. There are so many Africans that when they saw what happened to Israel on October 7th, their hearts broke all over again. And this is something that unfortunately does not get put out in the media because there's a different agenda. What you do see, or you see these other political elites from all over the world who kind of parrot the same talking points and the genocide, but you don't see the millions and millions of Africans on the ground who are not only standing with Israel, but are praying and repenting to God on behalf of their president, on behalf of their government for standing against Israel. Someone asked, Gail, I see who are the perpetrators of these heinous acts in Africa? So they're different terrorist groups. So when it comes to Nigeria, it's Boko Haram. In this case, the story that I was just sharing was the Fulani herdsmen. They're also in Nigeria. Boko Haram. I mean, we remember the famous "Bring Back Our Girls" hashtag. They're the ones who took those girls, right? We talked about Leah Sharibu before. She was abducted when she was, I believe, 16, or she is 16 now. I have to double check. She was abducted as a girl, and she's been forced to have babies. And they're trying to forcibly convert her to Islam. She still refuses to this day. She says, I will not convert. I will stay a Christian. But she's one of the many girls that have been taken and not retrieved. As a matter of fact, Boko Haram put out a video, I think it was a year after that whole campaign, and he was like, one of the leaders had the girls around him wearing burqas and everything, and he said, they're never coming back. Your girls are never coming back. These people have sworn allegiance to Iran. These people have, I mean, this is not, this, like, if you guys watch DC comics or cartoons, there's a hero. He doesn't have any powers, but his name is the Question, and he's like this ultra, like, skeptical detective, even more so than Batman. And he's always, drawing these, like, he's a crazy conspiracy theorist, but he's most of the time he's right about stuff. And this isn't like that, right? This isn't like we're finding some hidden links. These are alliances that are pretty known. When it comes to Sudan, it's this militia called the Rapid Support Forces, which we'll talk about in just a moment. But what I've been seeing, and I've said this before, and I'll say it again, there are young activists in the West who, in my opinion, they're wrong about Israel. And so in that way, they've been programmed by, radicalism. They've been programmed by Islamism. They've been programmed by far left ideology, all that stuff. And so, but they're independent thinking enough to actually see the stuff that's happening in different parts of Africa. And so I've seen some of these young activists call out what's going on in the Congo, call out what's going on in Sudan. But then what happens is they usually, and I've been seeing this more and more, make disclaimers, right? They'll put on their posts, by the way, this doesn't mean that I'm a Zionist in any way or I agree with Israel, because genocide is always wrong. And I want you guys to know that you still stand, stand up for Palestine, 10 toes down for Palestine, free Palestine, all that stuff. And they do that because they even see that it's not a difficult connection to make, that the people who are perpetrating these things on the Sudanese, which are, so like the rapid support forces, have allied themselves with various different Arab groups, right? Which a lot of those groups are also responsible for enslaving the Black Sudanese, the same people who enslaved our friend Simon Deng, who's now free. They've been doing this, right? So those are the same Arabs who are linked to Hamas. They appreciated what Hamas did on October 7th. They're friends with Hamas. They like Iran. They want Iran's support. Iran funds a lot of these people, right? So it's the connection actually isn't hard to make. So when you stand up and you say, free Sudan, free South Sudan, and then you see people who support Israel, I say, yeah, that's right. And then you have to back, oh, no, I'm not with you guys. I'm not with you guys. You'd have to ask yourself a few questions here, because if you actually are involved and you want to see change happening in Sudan, then you must know that some of the forces that are keeping South Sudan like it is are the same forces that invaded Israel on October 7th, right? Like you must see that connection. And so for you might even start to understand why more of the Free Palestine people don't even utter a word about Africa. And that's why, because they see that it's too closely linked. If we start talking about these other countries over here, people will start to make, anyone who's thinking will make that connection. Wait, doesn't Iran fund this terror? Or I just found out that, okay, but then I thought that right? So most people will shy away from talking about any of the other issues because it'll shine a bad light back on them. Because just like the Arab slave trade that started in North Africa back in the 7th century, it's happening. It's still happening now. Just like then, it's happening now. The perpetrators are largely Arab Muslims. We talked about this before. I mean, Arabia used to be one area on the map, and now Arabs are all over North Africa. I mean, that's called imperialism. That's called colonization. While they spread out, they enslaved Africans. They're still doing it now. And so, like I said, it's not hard. And there are also Jews who are subjugated to them in different parts of the Middle East, right? We talk about the what do we call it? I wasn't going to talk about this now, but the way Jews were treated as second and third class citizens when they're living in places like Jordan and Iraq and Syria. There were periods in history where, like in Baghdad, for instance, Jews, this is where Hitler got the idea of the Yellow Star, actually. The leader at the time of in Iraq would make Jews wear yellow stars. That's where it started, right? There are things called the jizya tax, where Jews were taxed more than their Arab counterparts for things. There are rules like pretty similar to Jim Crow rules, right? There are rules like you can't have, for instance, your house can't be higher than your Muslim neighbor's house. So if you're building a house, you have to make sure that it's lower than them. You can't be. It's kind of similar, even in apartheid South Africa. Like you can never be higher than or at the same level as the white man back during South Africa. So if you're black and you're on a horse and a white man's on a horse, you got to get down. If he's standing up, you have to sit down. If he's sitting, you have to get on your knees. Like that's kind of similar type of thing, right? And all that to say that it's not hard to see that, to make that connection. But if you want to if it just feels good to you to say free Palestine and you just want to be connected to that, then you are going to either ignore what's happening on the continent because you know that the same perpetrators are the same perpetrators that are attacking Israel all the time, or you're going to try to contrive this or try to sever that connection for people. So you will speak out, but then you'll try to cut that connection off because you don't want people to see that the same evil that's being done in Africa is being done to Israel. So that's what we have right now. I hope I answered your question, Gail. That was a long kind of way around. I see here, Michelle. I see you asked what can be done to help educate Gen Z, the college students. They are becoming radicalized. How did that happen? We talked about that before. I was actually, a matter of fact, just a couple weeks ago, we talked about what was going on in Colombia and all that stuff is a train wreck in slow motion because this has been happening for a long time. For instance, 2004, we talked about this. Our friend Charles Jacobs, if you don't know him, look up iabolish.org, look up African Jewish Alliance.org. He's done tireless work over the past few decades to actually free African slaves, to free slaves around the world. You should look up the work that he does and with the organizations that he leads. One of our favorite partners. He made a documentary in 2004 called Colombia Unbecoming. Show the documentary. It's on YouTube. We have it linked on our Substack and everything. Look up Colombia Unbecoming and maybe type in 2004. You'll find it on YouTube. And this was 2004. Okay. It's mostly just students talking about how they're being intimidated and harassed on campus by their professors, by their Muslim professors, by their Arab professors. They're just teaching their ideology and their opinion and not history. One girl said that she wanted to talk to her professor about what he was teaching about Israel. And look, this is a place of academia. This is academia. So she talked to him after class and he told her, your eyes are green. You're not really a Semite. You have no voice in this fight. Stuff like that, right? This Israeli student said he had been to a few of the professor's classes. So again, same thing. I want to go and introduce myself. Hey, I want you to know, I'm Israeli. And immediately professor says, oh, you're Israeli. How many Palestinian children have you killed? And at first the guy was taken aback. The student was like, excuse me? He said, how many Palestinian children have you killed? And the Israeli student said to him, I'm not going to answer that, but maybe you can answer me this. How many of your family members and friends celebrated after 9/11? Because again, this is 2004. It's just 3 years after 9/11. And then that, the class kind of erupted and everyone was like, oh, and it turned into a big thing. But what I'm saying is that these students are recounting their experiences with their professors bullying them at times for daring to challenge what the professor's preaching and teaching, and how heinous it actually is, right? So you watch the documentary. So Charles Jacobs shows this documentary to a room full of leaders. By leaders, I mean pro-Israel leaders, right? Jewish and Christian, like people who are like, we're all on the same team here, right? Now at this time, this 2004, I'm 14 years old, so I'm nowhere near this fight. I'm in high school trying to do my thing. He shows this video, and the overwhelming consensus is we will not show this documentary. It's what's the word? Offensive. We don't want to offend our Muslim brothers and sisters. It's too sensitive. We're not gonna show it. Okay, so now Charles isn't the only example, and 2004 is still even too late. But what I'm saying is there have been harbingers for decades. My father puts it like this, and I love it. I keep saying this. He says, at this point, when it comes to college campuses like Columbia, like Duke, like UNC Charlotte, like San Francisco University, he said, UCLA, whatever. He said, our children, your children, are being brainwashed by the children of the professors that brainwashed their parents. That's how legacy this thing is. And it's not because one day, the big bad man just kind of snuck up on us. We didn't see it. In every generation, right? Our Jewish brothers and sisters say in every generation, there are those who arise who try to kill us, but the Holy One, blessed be he saves us or he sustains us. In every generation, there are people who there are prophets who say, hey guys, we might want to watch out for this. We might want to, okay, so that's not really a good sign. If your teachers, again, I said this before, I remember watching I used to like watching the show Wonder Years, and that show is before my time. My mom used to watch that show, and the show was set in the, I want to say it was set in the 60s. Um, and set in the 60s. I know my mom watched it when she was a child, so I think she watched it in the 70s and 80s, but it was set in the 60s. And even then, some of the things that the show was depicting was, the whole thing of the show was from the perspective of the youngest kid, Kevin, right? So it's like from his perspective, how basically life changes as he gets older. And the way I see it is like how his innocence is kind of taken away little by little as he grows up. He learns something else about his own life or his siblings' life or his parents' life or the world around him, right? He's made aware of these things that kind of force him to grow up a little bit. And so there's always, like, to me, the endings are always a little bit bittersweet. Um, and sometimes more bitter than sweet. But the backdrop, he has a sister who's very kind of like a hippy dippy, and some of the things that but so there's the tension between his older sister, who's, I think she's the oldest, and his father, who's a war veteran. There's some stark differences, and some of the things that she says to him on a show to show basis, like pretty much every episode. Some of the stuff that she says to him are, sometimes they're borderline or just full out, communistic. She'll say these talking points to him about, um, working for the man and being a warmonger, America being this terrible place, and him being, because he was a soldier, all that stuff, right? So you see actually glimpses of that even back then, and that show is reflecting the reality of the times. So that means that in the 60s, this was going on, right? And I guarantee you that there were people in the 60s that said, "Hey guys, um, have you looked at our textbooks recently? They're kind of problematic." I mean, now we're at the point where foreign countries are pumping billions of dollars into, I think it was like $11 billion last year, into our American textbooks in our universities and even our elementary schools, like K through 12. Okay. So we've way past the point of no return right now. I mean, that's who, even if it's not a law, like practically, who lets other countries, by the way, not even allied countries, right? Just from all of Qatar, who allows those countries, who allows other countries to fund and sponsor your school to teach your children? They probably don't have your best interest at heart. I mean, let's just look at this logically. It's, yeah, almost said something else, but I got to stay focused. Who does that? But so the signs have been on the wall for a long time. So when it comes to now coming back to your question, Michelle, what can be done to educate Gen Z? To me, I mean, it's starting to happen. It's happening a lot. And the movements are already happening, right? My parents, a lot of things they did for us were kind of ahead of their time. They homeschooled us, and that was such a weird thing to do when we were kids, especially for a Black family. All the stigmas, everything. Now, one of the biggest, largest growing education movements in the Black community, but all over, like not just the Black community in America, is homeschooling. Because parents are going, especially during the lockdowns, people were seeing what their kids were learning in school. The parents were like, "Oh heck no!" So there are a lot of parents who are rearranging their schedules, rearranging their lives to homeschool their kids. Right? I think that what's going to need to happen for not just Gen Z, but the generation after them, is a complete unplug, a complete upstream swimming of what's been going on now. You cannot expect different results doing the same thing over and over and over again. That's insanity. So we are more than aware now of how backwards and how evil and how screwed up our public schools largely are. There's still good ones depending on where you live, but I'm talking about by and large, the things that they're teaching our kids. We're more than aware of that now. It's not a secret. The people who used to say it were labeled conspiracy theorists, even by some of us who are maybe watching this. Now we go, okay, no, this is for real. They're actually teaching they're not teaching the stuff they're supposed to be teaching. So so the illiteracy rate in the Black community amongst Black boys in California is 80%. Across the country, it's almost that high. And not just with the Black community, all over now, we are not reading. We can't comprehend things. We can't think critically. Why? Well, the big part of the reason why is because the schools are supposed to be teaching it are being told to teach all kinds of other foolishness, okay, including political ideologies that are warped and twisted about Israel and Jews, um, and then all kinds of other stuff, oversexed education. Let's read these kids' books about, how these two children are having sex, and literally like pornography in books, all that kind of stuff, right? So we're aware of this. We know this now. To know this and then to still put your child into that system. And then for those who are Christians who are watching, say, "Oh, just trust God, it'll be fine." That you are a fool. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be that intense, but that is a foolish thing to do. If you know that the system is designed to brainwash your child, and you decide to put your child into the system anyway, and just pray and tell God, "Okay, God, just make sure they don't." That's you. God says His grace to you is showing you the foolishness, so you can make a different decision. That's a lion's den. Don't put your child in that. I'm telling you right now, you are not Daniel. This is not the Persian Empire. This is a different situation. I'm telling you, that's a lion's den. Don't put your child in there. And then you go, you know what? That's fine. I got a lot of stuff to do, and I kind of want to keep my day like it is. I'm going to put them in that lion's den, and just trust you, just like Daniel. You'll deliver them like Daniel, and then it doesn't happen. Your child gets mauled and ripped to shreds, and you go, "Oh my gosh, what happened to my child?" What happened is that you put them in the meat grinder. I mean, I don't do that. Don't do that. So what we can do now for those who can see that their children are beginning to be brainwashed, you have to make drastic decisions. It's not going to get better. It's only going to get worse because these people who want to brainwash your kids are aggressive. They're focused. They know what they want and what they need, and they know how to get it. You are going to have to be just as forthright and focused about making sure that doesn't happen. So it starts in our homes. I hope that answered your question. Michelle, if you're still on with us, it was a long way to answer your question. But yes, I fully believe that it's the long game. We have to, fighting against what's happening is one thing, and that's like directly, right? And that's important. But that's only a small percentage of the battle. A larger percentage is to think differently moving forward. That's what we have to do. Otherwise, we're fighting against all this stuff while more things are happening right behind us. It's never going to work out. Never, ever. So I blame you, Michelle. You made me go away off topic and everything. No, I'm just kidding. No, thank you for you guys continue to ask questions. This is good. So that being said, I talked about Nigeria. I want to move to Sudan just for a moment because I did mention it and I want to go back to it again. I mean, it's a recent story, but it's a larger problem that's happening in Sudan, right? There's an article that talks about there's a UN envoy that describes what's happening. Children were piled up and shot. That was something that happened just last week by the Rapid Support Forces, RSF, which, in my research of what's going on in Sudan, you have the RSF who are essentially terrorists. I mean, they're murdering innocents. They're the ones who killed those children. They're the ones who are largely responsible for the murdering of the innocent people that are happening right now. That's happening right now in Sudan. But they're butting heads. They're fighting with the Sudan armed forces, and the problem is the Sudan armed forces, the SAF and the RSF, they worked together to oust Omar Bashir, who was the former president of Sudan. Omar Bashir supported the RSF. They worked with him, but they worked together to oust him. Now the issue became who is going to be the dominant military, who's going to absorb who, and that's where you have this. Right now, it's much more complex than that, but I'm just giving you right. So what makes it kind of complicated is that the RSF was recognized by Bashir's government, by the government, as a legitimate military. So you have these two militaries who have been recognized by the government, who are fighting now for who's going to be in power, and that's caused all this stuff. Now the problem with RSF, and this isn't me taking sides either, I'm just telling you what's going on, because we've been very much aware of what's going on the ground and what's going on in Sudan in terms of the slavery specifically, but also the stuff that's been around that. So the RSF has allies with a few different Arab militias as well. And if you know anything about those Arab terrorist factions, what I'm going to call them, they are the ones responsible for enslaving the Sudanese people of South Sudan. Okay, so now looking at that, you're going, okay, perhaps, and this, I wanted to talk to my friend Simon. I wasn't able to reach him today. I'll probably try to reach him the other day, because I want to know if the RSF or people at least suspected that the RSF had these ambitions when they ousted Omar Bashir in the first place, right? I mean, you see it all over the world. You have people who take advantage of a very bad situation and they speak out about things and they speak truth to things, but their intention is not to make things better. Their intention is to be in power, right? We talked about the economic freedom fighters in South Africa when the issue of land expropriation had resurfaced in South Africa. And the whole thing is land expropriation without compensation or with compensation, meaning should we seize the land back that was taken from blacks during apartheid and not compensate the whites who own it, even though they're the children, even grandchildren of the people who took it, meaning like they grew up with this land, and we're going to seize it back and give it to its rightful owners or give it to black people. And the fight was, should they be compensated for that? Should not? Should we take it? Da, da, da. And Julius Malema, the leader of the EFF, one of the things he said was, if you guys vote me into power and the EFF into power, what we propose, not even if you vote us, what we're proposing is the government seizes all the land and then we'll own it and we'll parcel it out as we see fit. Sound familiar? So only problem is it's not all whites who own the land in South Africa. There are black people who own the land in South Africa as well, including the late King Zwelithini, who said, you can try to come here and take our land. We will fight you for it and we will kill you. And he was very serious about that. He's like, oh, there'll be blood on the ground. You can guarantee that. See, the problem, so I mean, yeah, the EFF, they don't hide it. They're communists. They're Marxists. They're communists. They love communism. And so I've seen the leaders speak and other people, when they call out the ANC for different internal corruption things and mismanagement, they're right on the money. They're not lying about that stuff, right? They're right on it, and it resonates with people. Sometimes I'll watch it and I'll be like, yeah, man, that's on point. The problem is they're focused. They don't want to actually make things better in South Africa, so they want to be in power, right? So I wonder, and I'm gonna, like I said, maybe next week when we're on here, I'll bring him on or someone, my friend Simon or someone else. If the RSF always kind of had this agenda before Bashir was ousted, because just like in Libya, when Muammar Gaddafi, when we took him out, that's when Libya descended into mass slavery. I mean, that's where a lot of the slaves, at least 1 million, but way more now. And yeah, that's unfortunately that's what happens when another side effect of bad leadership. See, that's the thing is, as people of God, we should strive, if we're leaders, whatever we're governing, to govern with excellence, with integrity, with humility, with wisdom, with godly wisdom, all those things, because that's what we're supposed to do. But also, one of the side effects of poor leadership, mismanagement, and all those things is that you have people with even worse intentions than you. You may think that you're just living large, living the good life. I got my presidential suite. I got my cars. I got the power. I can do whatever I want to do, whenever I want to do it. And I can take these bribes from other countries, make millions, billions, and run the country up in debt while I'm living large and all that kind of stuff, right? And it'll be cool. But the problem is the people will groan and they'll cry out against you. And sometimes the leader that gets raised up is not the one that should be raised up. So this leader takes advantage of the fact that the people are moaning and complaining because of legitimate stuff that's going on. They pretend like they're going to answer their cries. They get you ousted, and now the country gets even worse. That's on you, right? They just took advantage of a situation. You made the environment such that they can step in and say, oh, I'll make sure these things are better for you. So that's another side effect. I see your question, Michelle. You said, then why do they continue to get support from the UN? Seems like South Africa is leading the charge against Israel. No one is calling them out. Because the UN is extremely corrupt. The UN is this. The UN is made up of Islamist and Marxist countries that have teamed up together to create a voting bloc against the United States and Israel for a long, long time. So, of course, they get support from the UN. The South African government is in bed with Iran. They're in bed with Hamas. And again, I'll say this again: it's the South African government. If you ever go to South Africa, if you visit most of any country in Africa, on the ground, it's a completely different sentiment. Like I said, after the ANC took Israel to the International Court of Justice, there were like these prayer meetings that were held all over the country. Millions and millions of Christians who, again, I said, were crying out and repenting to God for their leadership, to say, Lord, please don't curse us for what our leadership is doing to Israel. And so, yeah, as far as the ANC goes, it really, for a lot of these leaders, it's not so much about ideology as it is about money, right? So these leaders get paid lots and lots of money to wear keffiyeh in parliament and to chant free Palestine, right? So for them, there's not a connection they don't actually hate Israel, but it's just as evil because they just like money. You mean to tell me you'll give me $1 billion, or you'll loan our country $1 billion, which I can take much of, you mean to tell me, China, that you'll build this bridge in our country for a loan which accrues interest every minute? Seriously, a loan that we can't possibly pay back. And if we can't pay it back, you'll just own the bridge. I make out like a bandit with money, and that's all good. Do your thing. I will sell out my country for the money. And so that just, it plays out in everything. Okay, so now another country with tons of money says, hey, we'll give you X amount of dollars because we know South Africa is a voice, right? I mean, when it comes the word apartheid was coined in South Africa, right? So this would give us a lot of sway. We'll give you all this money, and all you got to do is stand against Israel. That's what they do. And it's money. It's money. Okay, well, then we'll do that. And like my father-in-law, who is the president of the African Christian Democratic Party, Reverend Kenneth Mishwe, elections are coming up right now in South Africa. May 29th are elections. He's running. His party is running. He's running for president now. So pray for them. Pray for him. He was in parliament. I shared the video. Maybe next I'll make sure that you guys can find the link. Reverend Kenneth Mishwe, Meshoe. He spoke at Parliament right after the ANC took Israel to the International Court of Justice and accused it of genocide. He stood in the middle of Parliament and he was getting heckled the whole time. And the last thing he said before his time was up was two things. He talked about the book of Isaiah, says, no weapon formed against you shall prosper. Then he says, Genesis 12:3 says, I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who curse you. He said, ANC, you have invited a curse on yourself, and you are going to get it. And that's when his time was up. So again, what you see is the result of weak leadership. The Bible says the love of money is the root of all evil, right? People like to say money. It didn't say money's root of all. It says the love of money. So you have a lot of people who just love money, right? They're not really, they don't have skin in the game, or they're not really invested in that way. But if the price is right, sure, I'll say whatever. I'll sell my country out and say whatever. So all the while South Africa is focused on Israel, the South African people, in addition to praying and repenting for the ANC's treatment of Israel, the South African people are simply saying, we have our own problems. Can we just focus on that? I mean, golly. And this is what my friend was talking about. He said, when it comes to my friend he's South African, he said, when it comes to Israel spiritually, South Africans are Zionists through and through. We know what the Bible says, and the land of Israel belongs to the Jews. You can't sway them on that. When it comes to politically modern day Israel, what's happening on the ground, he said, most South Africans don't care if you really ask them. Not because they hate Israel, meaning they're like, it's that country over there. Our country is here. We don't have power consistently for a whole day, every day. we there's food insecurity. I keep giving this example, and I'll give it again. The Economic Freedom Fighters, the Communist Party I was telling you about, EFF. Julius Malema called on South Africans to boycott foods that came from Israel, that were imported from Israel. And he got so much backlash. And the backlash, again, wasn't even I'm Israel high, I'm Israel high. The backlash from the South African people was, okay, Julius, are you going to pay for our food? Are you going to provide for us? How are we going to eat? We're already struggling with how we're going to actually eat our foods. And our government's not doing a very good job of regulating things, of managing, of making sure that we have enough. We're in debt. We can't pay for a lot of stuff. There's a lot of poverty going around. And you're telling us to withhold buying certain foods because it comes from certain countries? Can you do something about what's happening in our country then? So that's what's going on, right? There was something else. There was a last week I talked about it. It was because it was the genocide convention that was happening, the apartheid convention I should say was happening in South Africa. Like this is the first one, and there's news coverage about it, and this one of the Black South African leaders was talking about all the anti-Israel talking points, right? I looked at the comments, and the comments were overwhelmingly South African, and they were overwhelmingly bashing this whole thing. Again, not even saying we love Israel and Hamas. They're saying, why are we spending so much time and energy on what's happening in Israel when we have so many problems in South Africa that aren't being addressed? I mean, this whole, like, what is this? People are starting to wake up. So pray for South Africa. The elections are May 29th. And South Africa and Africa in general is at a tipping point. I think this year, 2024, the most elections globally are happening than they've ever happened before. Like, this is the largest number of elections around the world that are happening this year. Pray for Africa, pray for South Africa, because not just the Israel part, but the, there's a calling on Africa. Africa used to, different parts of Africa especially, used to be the breadbasket of the world. And because of very intense forces, both from the outside and then from within, Africa hasn't been that as of late. But she has a chance to be that again. There's some big obstacles that are keeping her from reaching that, but one of the biggest helpful and just amazing players in this has been Israel. Israel does more for and with and alongside Africa than any other country, with asking for nothing in return. The two Tanzanian boys who were killed by Hamas on October 7th, they were in Israel on an agricultural internship. They were getting paid to learn about agriculture, and so that they can go back home and teach it to people there, but also to start an agribusiness. That's what Felix Matenga was saying, and then Joshua Malal as well. They had dreams of going back home and doing this. And Israel has all of these Joshua Malal has all of these, he had all these aspirations, and Israel has all these programs that, with no strings attached, they bring in people from all over the world, but namely Africa, to learn these things. And they don't force them to do anything in return. A lot of these people go back home, maybe will never go to Israel again, but they take the knowledge that they've gained and they use it to better their people. Israel's been sowing that seed for a long, for decades now, shortly after they became a nation in 48. And so that, we're praying that those seeds that have been planted yield just amazing results, amazing fruit, and that we can see Africa standing on her own 2 feet again, because there's a lot going on. Someone asked something. I want to make sure I'm not missing that. Someone's asking about my handle. So yes, so thank you. I'll take this opportunity to talk about IBSI. So my name is Joshua Washington. My handles, you can find me at Joshwash, at Joshwash IBSI. So Joshwash IBSI or Joe Davi Music. I'm also a musician, and in my performing and composing, arranging, and all those things, the activism and advocacy are wrapped up in there all the time. But I'm the executive director of the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel. So IBSI Now, you can find us at IBSI Now, or go to ibsi.org, and you can find everything else about us on our website. You can subscribe to our Substack, ibsi.substack.com. You can become a legacy builder, donate to our organization, make a monthly donation, really help support us in this work that we're doing, because these weekly live events is just one small part of a lot of we do in-person events. We have these community outreach, these community engagement programs. We have different things that we have going on, and a lot more the rest of this year. And we would love your support and your help as we do these things, as we continue to strengthen the ties between Africa and Israel, and strengthen the Black and Jewish relations and ties through education, advocacy, and community engagement. Our big partner, shout out to the African Jewish Alliance. You guys check that out, africanjewishalliance.org. Look at the amazing work they're doing. If you want to donate to them, go to the website and do it. We are their big partner, and your donations go through us. We give it straight to them. We have some events coming up. One that's not on our website just yet, but on June the 18th, so the week of Juneteenth, we are having Simon Dang, I explained before, former slave from South Sudan. He was enslaved when he was 9 years old for a few years, and he has an incredible story of how he escaped, but very, very, very strong supporter of Israel, very amazing force for good. He has just a political record that's 10 miles long. He lives here in the States now. We're having him in Charlotte, North Carolina, for an event, and it's going to be a beautiful one. The theme is Juneteenth. If you remember, this is 2 years after slavery had officially ended. There were slaves in Texas who didn't know that slavery had ended until they were made aware. And just like now, there are slaves now, even though we have our freedom here in this country, there are still slaves who aren't free. And so we are going to be using that time to speak about that. It's going to be beautiful. If you are in the Carolina area, North or South Carolina, definitely come join us. We'll have more details for that soon. So Stephanie, I hope that answered your question. And that's for anyone who's watching now. We would love your support in these events, especially as we push for these I think some of the biggest human rights issues of our day, one of them being modern day slavery. So we'll talk more about that soon. I may have someone as a guest on this show next week, so we can go a little bit deeper into that. But I think that's all the time we have for today. It's 9:00 Eastern. You guys come see us every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern. Come check out our live forums. If you like them, if you've been enjoying them, please give to IBSI. Follow us on any social media. You'll see links to give, links to follow, to visit our website. Give. We really appreciate it. All this work we do, we do because this is what we know we're called to do. But as the demand for IBSI increases, and it's been increasing quite a bit over this past year, we are at capacity at what we are able to do with the budget that we have. And so with your help, we can expand this work, and we can continue to perform with excellence and to do this very, very important work that we're doing. So thank you very much. I hope to see you all next week. You guys have a good rest of your week. Good night.